What are the costs on the US economy on waging a trade war with China? In 2018, the USA started a trade war with China. The US government increased import tariffs on key sectors. Within weeks of the first tariff hike, China retaliated. More recently, the US stepped its efforts to block Chinese products in its markets. The trade war is far from over. It only just begun. 16th April 2018. The U.S. Commerce Department recommends a 24% tariff on all steel imports and 7.7% on aluminum. It's seen as a policy directed at China, which is the world's largest maker of steel. 22nd March 2018, China said it will impose tariffs on U.S. goods worth $3 billion. Same day, President Trump announced a plan to impose further tariffs on Chinese imports worth $60 billion, but grants temporary exemptions from aluminum and steel tariffs to the European Union, South Korea, and other countries. The 2nd of April 2018, China imposes 25% tariffs on 128 U.S. products. The following day, the U.S. government proposes new additional tariffs on Chinese imports worth $50 billion. This includes televisions, medical equipment, aircraft parts, and batteries. Following day, China proposes tariffs on U.S. goods worth $50 billion. And then on the following day, the 5th of April 2018, President Trump announces he's considering additional tariffs on Chinese products worth $100 billion. The 15th of June 2018, President Trump announced new tariffs on goods worth $34 billion that will come into force on 6th July 2018. He also proposed a new list of tariffs for imported goods worth $16 billion. The same day, China said it will respond to these new U.S. impositions with its own new tariffs on agricultural products and manufactured goods. On January 2019, the official delegations from U.S. and China began trade talks, which were held in Beijing, the first face-to-face meeting since agreeing to a 90-day truce, which ends March 1st. And then on May 5th, 2019, Trump said that the U.S. would increase tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese products from 10% to 25%, effective Friday, May 10th. Trump also said that he would come up with new tariffs of 25% on additional $325 billion worth of Chinese goods, which would cover essentially all remaining Chinese products. May 10, 2019. In response to the increase in tariffs from 10 to 25% on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, the China Ministry of Commerce released a statement announcing that it deeply regrets the tariffs and that necessary countermeasures will be taken. May 13, 2019. China announced that it will increase tariffs on $60 billion worth of U.S. goods from June 1, 2019. Products affected include beef, lamb, pork, vegetables, juice, cooking oil, tea, coffee, refrigerators, furniture, among many others. Let's illustrate this in a simple two-country model. Imagine a world with only two countries, the USA and China. And imagine that these two countries only have two policy options: free trade or protectionism. Economic theory shows that countries benefit from free trade. This is because through trade, countries can reach a more efficient allocation of their scarce production factors, which results in a higher level of production in both countries, and a net welfare gain. In fact, the only welfare costs that may lower the gains from free trade somewhat are increased pollution linked to the transportation of goods from one country to the other. This cost represents a negative externality from trade. Even though trade is beneficial, many countries opt for protectionist measures. That seems a contradiction. Why would governments impede free trade if it generates a net welfare gain, that is, higher per capita income for the country? Well, the reason is that free trade makes some sectors grow and other sectors shrink. The sectors who face competition from imported goods will lobby with the government for protection. They may contribute to election campaigns from key senators and representatives, as well as governors and presidents, and engage in rent-seeking activities. Rent-seeking activities are all kinds of activities that are unproductive in the sense that they do not generate production and have as a goal to maintain or increase the firm's market power and market share. If two countries are initially trading but one out of the blue switches to protect its domestic producers from international competition, this country temporarily could increase its welfare at the cost of a welfare loss in the other country. However, if both opt for protectionism, both lose welfare. We can depict this using game theory. If both countries opt for free trade, the gains are the largest. However, if one country opts to protect its market while the other country still keeps its market open, the protectionist country reaps an additional benefit. You can see that unless the two countries decide to cooperate and build mutually beneficial trade relations, the countries ends up in the upper left box, where both close their markets. This is the Nash equilibrium in this trade game. This simplified example shows that there is a need for international trade agreements because without such agreements, countries will end up in a trade war with each other, characterized by each one increasing its protectionist measures as a retaliation of the other country's protectionist measures. Now, let's use the ISLM and ADAS model to see what will happen in the short and medium run. For simplicity, let's continue assuming that a world contains only two countries, the USA and China. A unilateral increase in import tariffs by the USA will result in a fall of the demand for imported goods in the USA. This will improve, albeit temporarily, the US current accounts balance. In the ISLM model, the IS curve shifts to the right, indicating an increase of GDP and an increase of the interest rate. An increase of the US interest rate will result in an inflow of international financial capital, which leads in the forex market to an excess demand for dollars, resulting in an appreciation of the US dollar vis-a-vis the other currencies of its trading partners. This appreciation will, at least partially, offset the positive impacts of the import tariffs on the current account, as it will make Chinese imports, even with the new import tariff, cheaper again, and make US exports more expensive for China. This positive impact on US GDP is reflected by the fictitious payoff of 4 in the game theoretic framework we use. In the Chinese economy, the IS curve shifts to the left, GDP decreases, and the interest rate falls. The loss of GDP in China is reflected by the fictitious payoff of 1 in the cell where China continues to free trade while the US opts for protectionism. China's retaliation is paid back in the form of increased tariffs on imports from the US. This leads in the US to a shift to the left of the IS curve, and in China, the IS curve shifts to the right. Assuming that the retaliation exactly offsets the impact of the first move of the US, both countries are back to their original GDP levels. However, now each has to allocate domestically more production factors to the production of goods and services that before the trade war started, they were importing. By importing those goods, each country had reaped efficiency gains. These gains will now be lost. We can represent this in the ISLM model as a shift of the FE curve to the left. The new general equilibrium is where the FE curve crosses the IS curve. In this new equilibrium, the interest rate is higher than before the trade war, and the LM curve will adjust upward, reflecting an increase of the general price level. A trade war with complete retaliation leaves both countries thereof worse off. In both countries, exports and imports fell, and therefore the current account did not improve. However, potential GDP fell as well, resulting in a higher general price level and higher interest rates. This contributes to the increase of interest rates globally. In order to visualize it, we may take the US goods and service markets and compare it side by side to the aggregate goods and service markets of all its trade partners, and see how a change in the US interest rate affects the worldwide interest rates. As for the changes in the labor market, the first move of the US to increase the protectionism temporarily increases the number of jobs in the country. However, as soon as the Chinese retaliate, those gains are lost. The sectors in the economy who are hit by the Chinese import tariffs suffer greatly. From a political viewpoint, this is not good for the sitting president. He may lose the votes of especially the beef, lamb, pork, vegetables, juice, cooking oil, tea, coffee, soybean, refrigerators, and furniture producers, among many others hit by the Chinese tariffs. In the ADAS curve, the initial US tariffs on Chinese goods resulted in a shift of the AD curve to the right, assuming that the general price level is rigid in the short run. This shows the initial increase of GDP in the US. However, the retaliation of China shifts the IS curve in the US back to the left, and therefore the AD curve also shifts to the left. Once both countries are in fully fledged trade war, productivity in both countries will fall, resulting in a shift of the vertical AES curve to the left. The price level will adjust upward along the AD curve. In other words, in short term, trade barriers may seem to have a positive impact on the US GDP. However, this positive impact fades away as soon as China retaliates, and worse, the trade war results in efficiency losses which affects potential GDP negatively. This results not only in lower full employment GDP, but also in a higher price level. If trade wars are so harmful, why are countries like the US waging one? According to The Economist, Mr. Trump seems to think that trade is a zero-sum affair, in which a deficit is a sign of a bad deal. But the vast improvements in living standards after the Second World War went hand in hand with a rapid expansion in world trade over 8 trade rounds, each of which lowered barriers. Imports are in fact welcome because they benefit consumers and spur producers to specialize in what they do best. This point of view is further observable in this tweet. But those who think that the country that is a net importer loses from international trade while the country that is a net exporter gains, the idea of trade as a zero-sum game, miss the point, as both the importing and the exporting country gain. It is more likely, however, that President Trump's view on trade is not driven at all by what happens to aggregate overall welfare and per capita income to the US. Rather, it may be driven by special interest from those sectors who are more actively engaging in rent-seeking activities in Washington, D.C. to push through measures that protect their business. By looking at who stands to gain in the US from the trade war and how strong those businesses have been lobbying in Washington, D.C., waging this war may reveal whose interests the war is served. For sure, not the interests of the country.
Look. Pretty, isn't it? Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.